And Janine is once again going to be our moderator, and with her are going to be Neil Shaw, Connie DeHaan, and Eli B. Cohen, and they're talking about AI in veterinary practice. So come on up.
So this is a topic I probably know less about, so even better to be a moderator, because I can be completely neutral. And I think, like the last session, I think there are diverse opinions on our panel. And it'll be exciting to have the dialogue to see very across the spectrum how people are feeling about artificial intelligence. Maybe we start with a quick introduction of the panel.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me. My name's Eli Cohen. I work full-time at the NC State College of Veterinary Medicine as a radiologist there, and I also own a teleradiology company. And I'm involved with ACVR on the subcommittee for artificial intelligence and machine learning. And so that's sort of the things that have brought me here.
Great. Thank you, Janine. I'm Connie DeHaan. I'm the Director of Medical Affairs for IDEXX Telemedicine Consultants. We're in line of business in IDEXX, and we have over 150 global specialists that provide teleconsulting primarily in radiology and cardiology.
Yeah, I'm Neil Shaw. I founded SignalPET together with two partners and friends. The SignalPET is an artificial intelligence-based system that provides teleradiology interpretation, and we do so globally. We've been in the market for a little over 2 years now, and it's something that has become quite large and is growing rapidly.
Excellent. I'm actually going to ask each of you, there's obviously a lot of opportunity and a lot of perspectives about AI in radiology. So I'm going to actually ask each of the panelists just sort of share to open us up, sort of how do you see the opportunity, but also what are some of the perspectives and dangers and things we need to be cautious. I'm going to start at the other end with Eli.
Okay, so in disclosure, I'll probably end up being the foil, or at least seem like I'm the foil that might be against AI, but I'm actually a huge proponent of AI and what this technology can do for us. But my main interest as I've gotten interested in this topic and become vocal within ACVR in our college and try to raise awareness is the intersection of this new and disruptive technology with ethics, with errors and cognitive errors, both human and on the machine side, that we should be considering as we use these things, or whether we should use them, and also the differences between human and veterinary medicine, of which there are several relevant ones. I think we'll get into regulations and things later on in the talk, but those are very relevant. I think my overarching principle as I think about this topic is the Hippocratic Oath of first do no harm, that I think we need to keep in mind as we are, this is a place of innovation and pushing the boundaries, and I think that's all well and good, and I'm in favor of that. But these things can be very different, whether we're talking about using things to improve workflows versus things that are creating diagnoses. And then I would remind us all that we have the power to euthanize our patients as veterinarians. And so we need to make sure that as we're using these things, that we would use them in a way that, based on that decision, if that results in the death of a patient, then we would be satisfied and that's validated. And that's very different than on the human side. So those are sort of the overarching things that I come at it from, is first do no harm. And I think engendering trust and adoption of these things will be involved thinking more proactively about these other components besides just whether do we think this can pick out a mass on a radiograph is a very different decision than is it safe, is it causing harm, and is it changing outcomes, right? Like whether it's accurate is a different thing than whether it's even needed or changing outcomes in that patient population or how it's being used. So I think that's sort of the overarching way that I look at it, and then I would introduce the concept of a radiologist or a human in the loop, which would be current standard of care in human medicine, which is, I think, a lot of the place we look to for innovation when we're trying to move towards. And that's in a population that is generally better trained. Even a family medicine doctor does a residency. And that's not as an elitist comment. I'm just saying they have more training generally. Their data sets are better. They have regulatory hurdles that vet out these products, and even on the human side, these things are not generally being used in the absence of a radiologist specialist in the loop. So I think these would all be things that I'd encourage us to consider as we are developing and choosing to use or not use these products.
Great, thank you. I think we're all probably acutely aware that there's a huge gap between the capacity of the radiologists we have to meet the demand that's out there. So I think that's a huge opportunity in the market. What we'd like to do or consider at IDEXX is people and technology solutions. We believe that radiologists enabled by AI is the way to go and the way to look. The sexy part, of course, is what I would call pixel AI, which is looking at the image and finding things. But there's so many other opportunities for AI within radiology to make the radiologist more efficient. Everything from looking at the histories, pulling out the relevant portions of the history for the radiologist. I'm sure any of the other radiologists in the room are familiar with getting about 10 pages of patient history that we need to go through. So we can certainly use AI to do that and structure the inputs that we receive. There are other things that we can do as far as image identification, things we're already doing. You know, that's a thoracic radiograph, that's an abdominal radiograph, which is the right or the left. So we can do all of those things and also use AI to measure things on the radiographs that make the radiologist more efficient or do comparisons. And then also on the report writing. So we're already beginning to use AI-powered dictation software to make the radiologist more efficient, look for errors, and also produce a much higher quality report that helps patients and veterinarians make the veterinarians make better decisions for their patients, have those conversations with their clients. So I think there's a lot of ways that we can look at AI helping to make radiologists more efficient and make our reports even more powerful. I think there still is a huge gap there, though, that we still won't have enough radiologists to meet the demand, and I think that we can look at AI on the pixel level to perhaps offer some opportunities there as well. I think we need to be careful because there currently aren't any regulations that are overseeing it, and AI is a little scary. A lot of it depends on the training sets for the AI. Are you imposing any bias into the training set and into the AI, either geographically, breeds that are represented, the people that were actually training the model? So those are things that we need to be aware of. And veterinarians are generally not very savvy consumers of technology, so they may not ask the right questions. I think that quality oversight is also really important, and that's where the human element, I think, as Eli mentioned, comes in, that we are making sure that there is quality control over these products, because even if you don't insert bias, which I think is still possible, these systems can develop bias over time. And if you don't have any oversight, you might miss that. All right, Neil.
Thank you. You know, it's interesting and seeing a lot of old friends. When I arrived today, I got in late last night and look around the room. My previous career was the advancement of specialty practice, specialty medicine. And I was the medical founder of a company that largely was responsible for taking specialty practice from the, at the time, 20 or so universities, perhaps if you include AMC and Angel, to the major MSAs, metropolitan statistical areas. And it was a fascinating process. And I spent much time in many parts of the country identifying to friends and colleagues and practitioners, specialty medicine is who you should have a relationship with for your practice to be stronger. That was a previous career, and specialty medicine has grown, and I don't take anything away. As a specialist myself, I don't take anything away from specialty medicine. But what has happened in veterinary medicine is that the delta between specialty practice and primary care and emergency care has become too large. It's become too great. And what is the challenge in that? The challenge is that the specialty model is not scalable. It simply said is not scalable. And we all know that in the room. As a result, the prices are too high, the specialists are in limited numbers, the general practices aren't able to grow, because we don't currently have a scalable model for the profession. The solution is technology. Unquestionably, the solution is technology, and the solution is technology done right. This is why SignalPET was started, to enable practitioners, to enable emergency practices, to practice better, to improve the quality, and to lower the cost. And it simply said has checked all 3 of those boxes.
So- Go ahead.
Sorry. There are a couple of comments came up about regulation, and I would agree. The teleradiology services in veterinary medicine are not regulated when you compare to human medicine. It's absolutely correct. My colleagues are aware that in human medicine, a human radiologist is required to be licensed in the state where the patient is located. So in other words, if a radiologist is in Hawaii and the patient is in Oregon, that radiologist is required to be licensed in Oregon. Veterinary medicine, it's a huge loophole. There's no regulation, no requirements by the state boards on radiology because the veterinary radiologists haven't allowed it. I also strongly support quality control very strongly. We will discuss later quality. But if we want to go down the regulatory pathway, we should look at teleradiology as a whole, including AI. Identify standards. We've been able to set a new standard for radiology on a routine basis. Identify standards, and then have everybody adhere to those standards. Similar to what is done in human medicine, we would be fully supportive of that if my colleagues are as well. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you all. Appreciate the different points of view, so definitely 3 different kind of perspectives on how this can come to life and what that looks like. Eli, I'm gonna actually probe a little bit on the regulatory world. You made some provocative comments last night around regulation and the role it could play and should play in this space, so I'd love you to kick us off.
Sure. So AI is a medical device, and on the human side is viewed now there's a new category, software as a medical device. I'm not a lawyer. This is just my digging into this topic and trying to educate myself. Reading the definition of medical device, it certainly meets those criteria. It's making decisions that yield diagnoses and change treatments. There's very specific wording on the human side as to how to bring these things to market, not stifle innovation, while still protecting patients and the public. And a lot of that is based on risk. And so the FDA is going to be the regulatory body that's deciding whether those products come to market. And they don't want to stifle innovation. This is changing on the human side on a daily basis. It's not like they have it figured out either. It's in its infancy on the human side. We're embryos, homunculi, if you will, on the veterinary side. And so they have said, basically, you need to have FDA approval to come to market, but if you are low risk, they'll turn their head in order to not stifle innovation. Low risk is pretty uncommon. That might be something like an activity monitor that's been talked about the last day or 2 here. So that's not going to materially affect a patient's well-being or result in death or discomfort or surgery. Things that are medium or high risk, and there's years of papers on this, white papers on the human side, recommendations from the domain experts of radiology and outside of radiology as far as classification of risk, and that's really, I think, what we need to think about adopting. And the main reason for that is medium to high risk would be decisions that are being made that result in change to the medical decision, which is just about everything, could result in surgery or death. And I would argue that on the veterinary side, particularly as we're all talking about value-based care and access to care and that not everybody can do gold standard, is some decisions are made and might end up in euthanasia, and that could be a broken leg and someone can't afford to fix it, or an obstruction and they can't afford to go to surgery. These are decisions that could lead to euthanasia, which is you can't come back from that decision. And so almost everything in veterinary medicine is medium to high risk, I would argue. And as a result, the FDA has said, one, they have to be regulated, but the other component of that is there has to be a human in the loop in those medium to high risk decisions. It shouldn't be AI working on its own in the absence of a human. The big difference is, as you read everything, this should all be going through FDA regulation on the veterinary side, but there's a loophole that doesn't require pre-market approval for veterinary products. I would venture to say that if it did, there would be no veterinary products on the market because they probably would not meet those criteria. I'm happy to hear about data that challenges that, and that raises another issue about transparency and being aware of that information. So the big difference on the regulatory side is there's no loophole, there is no obstacle or safeguards to getting to market. And obviously, as we're innovating, there's lots of talk here about VCPR and potentially stripping some of these things back. And the wording in the AVMA guidelines also around what constitutes a consult versus a referral. These things were not conceived at a time when AI exists. One could read those things. You know, a referral is offloading diagnosis to typically a human, right? And there is a transfer of the VCPR. You could read that, and you could argue that if you're using AI, particularly a product that's reaching a diagnosis, and the end user, let's say a general practitioner or an ER doc, doesn't know how it's reaching that diagnosis, is the same thing as a referral. You can't ask it, how did you reach that diagnosis? Can you prove to me why that's correct or incorrect? And as I would consider myself a domain expert in imaging, I don't think that's a fair ask for a general practitioner in 2-minute, 15-minute appointment, these things that have come up in other talks, to appraise whether these products are doing what they're saying they're going to do, especially in the absence of information that the FDA would have required if it was on the human side. So you don't even have the information you need to decide if that's a valid product. So, you know, I think arguing for regulation is going to be a tough sell in this group, is my impression, but I do think then it's at the behest of the developers to have some, you know, ethics and guidelines in place to validate their products and make that available. It's not enough to just say, we looked at this many images and they were reviewed and it looked pretty good. The devil's in the details, and you have to know what to ask and know about ground truth for the sets, the validation sets, the testing sets. Was it internal or external? You know, these are all really important things, and part of that is, which I think we'll get into, is education about raising the level of awareness, radiologists, non-radiologists, developers, for what we should be looking for, that this is a product I should trust if we want people to be using this and start accepting new technologies.
Thank you. I'm going to let Neil, if you can just give a 2-minute, because I know you kind of sit on maybe a little bit of the opposite side of the spectrum there.
Sure. Thanks, Janine. Daniel Kellerman is one of the leading psychologists of this generation, has been called. He's a Nobel Prize winner. He wrote the book that's a standard in business, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. And in 2021, he came out with another book called Noise. This is somebody who's very, very well respected. And he identified that on human, well-regulated industry, human radiology reports, 40% of the time when multiple radiologists would be asked to read the same image, there was strong disagreement in the diagnosis, 40% of the time. He took it further and identified that an additional 20% of the time, when the same radiologist at 2 points in time was asked to read the same image, they changed the diagnosis without remembering that they previously read the films. The subjectivity of human thinking is huge. There is a place. There is a place for human thinking, without a doubt. Without a doubt, I'm not saying that there isn't a place for human thinking. What I want to identify is artificial intelligence is an incredibly, incredibly capable tool. And it's not simply a reflection of bias. It's true data. It is true science. It is true discovery. And it is amazing. It is a quality control determinant. That's something that we haven't seen before in the profession, and I know intimately from what I'm talking about. It's absolutely amazing. We can discuss it a little bit further, but this is a watershed moment for our profession. This is an enabler of our profession. This makes our profession stronger. It makes our profession better. It enables better care. It enables stronger veterinarians. The one ask I would have of Eli, and we'll respect what Eli does, is why radiologists as a special interest group serving their own interests, why have they never approached us? I'm very approachable. Why have I never received a phone call to really ask, hey Neil, can we talk about this? Why are they just forming committees to figure out how to regulate this? Why not engage? The phone has yet to ring.
So maybe, yeah, I'm gonna just kind of make a point here, I think, too, and then yes, absolutely. I think bias can be built in whether it's human or AI. I had a very provocative conversation with Kate over our dinner and drinks about, AI being trained in foreign countries and bias that gets built in of, is this the Indian view or the Asian view of the world, because so much of the tagging in that artificial intelligence happens in those countries. So I think bias can exist whether it's a human or AI. So I think in both sides of the equation. Eli, if we can just maybe 2 minutes respond to that, and then we'll move to quality and content.
Sure, I'll be quick. I guess I'm a bit surprised because Neil and I have actually exchanged emails where I've requested you to address the ACVR, so I'm a bit confused at that comment, if I'm being honest. And I've also attended webinars and asked questions which weren't answered. So in full disclosure.
I could be mistaken, but I've never.
Yeah,
I could be mistaken, but I've never received.
at the risk of making this
There's been
extra
no
spicy,
dialogue. There's
we have
been no
most certainly
dialogue.
exchanged
And
emails
there hasn't
where I've
been an
requested
invitation
that.
of dialogue.
So I think the
But-
point is to bring the two contrasting views.
Yeah,
so
and I
it'll be
would say the other side of that, the flip side of that coin, had we not exchanged emails in a different dimension, is that works both ways. And I would think that were I developing an oncology product or a cytology product or an API or whatever, I would probably go to domain experts and seek their involvement just to create the best product, regardless of
Yeah.
whether I think that's ethically correct.
If that's a misconception, I think you represent a regulatory component of the ACVR. Radiologists, multiple radiologists, as well as surgeons, as well as internists, as well as other specialists, have been intimately involved in the development of the product. Because those pushing for regulation of a new technology to hold it back have not been engaged, doesn't mean the specialty front has not been engaged.
So I will counter that. Last night, I think Eli was very open to what role does regulatory play, right? There is regulations that keep innovation out, and there's regulations that protect the pet. And I do think, while you may be arguing on either side, you're not that far apart in the fact that what you both want is what's best for the pet. So I think while you're arguing either side of it, I've heard both of you say what matters is the pet. And I think, Connie, you had some really good points around, like, how do we ensure quality? Because ultimately, as people who, I think somebody made the comment, everyone in this room loves pets, right? Like, that's one thing we can all bond around. I think that is at the core, how do we ensure we're maintaining that quality?
And I can talk a little bit about what we've done on the cardiology side at IDEX. We have an algorithm that assesses ECGs. And it was developed in conjunction with our entire cardiology team. And all of the quality control was done by that team, and the proof of concept was with them. And even though we have that running, those cases, a certain percentage of those cases still go back through the cardiology team for assessment. One, it's continued learning for the product, which is good, and it's also quality control. As far as quality control, absolutely, radiologists, what we do is very subjective. We're human. We make mistakes. We know that. We've been doing quality control for many years over our radiologists. We currently have a process in place which actually sends cases back through that have already been read by a radiologist to be reviewed and scored by another radiologist. If there's any sort of miss, then it's reviewed by yet another team of radiologists, and then we contact and make any appropriate changes. So that's what I think about when I think about quality control, and when I think about quality control in AI, it's the same sort of thing, and being transparent about, again, the training sets. You mentioned bias. Actually, a colleague of mine recently traveled to Europe and failed the facial recognition test because he's Black. And their facial recognition software clearly was not trained on people of color. So I think we have to recognize that exists and be aware of that. So that's where the quality control comes in on my mind. Neil, I totally support the use of AI appropriately in veterinary medicine wherever we can. As I said, there's a lot of different ways to think about using it: clinical decision support, looking through records, down to pixel identification.
Connie, I think it is very well spoken, and no doubt you guys set the standard. No question about it. I think the crux of the issue, and this will over the next several years it will play out, is that the frustration by some on the radiologist side is that they weren't consulted when AI is developed as an official group, even though individual radiologists and their opinions and their thoughts and really key previous leaders of the field were taken into strong consideration. And so this is a political discussion, not a scientific discussion. So we'll leave the politics aside. From a quality control perspective, there is it's important because we are a black box. In other words, the images come in, the results come out. What is currently being worked on with a team of radiologists, as well as folks from several different universities run by behavioral economists from several universities, as well as other strong individuals, is the first real study identifying the benefit of artificial intelligence in radiology versus a radiologist. This study will come out, it's at an academic snail's pace because the I's are being dotted and the T's are being crossed. The hope is for it to come out this year. It'll probably be the beginning of next year by the time it's published. And this is a landmark study. It's a landmark study across multiple continents. And what it will show is that on the items, specifically the tests that AI is used for, AI is stronger than the average radiologist. It is more accurate, it is more specific and more sensitive than the average radiologist. There is bias. There's bias that individuals have. Done properly, AI can remove a lot of those biases, taken as science. It can remove a heck of a lot of those biases and separate out what's real and what's not. In part of creating the system, we created an audit system to audit ourselves, to make sure that the data is correct, the data is correct, the data is correct. And what we have found is that same auditing system can be used for radiologists as well. So we're able to audit on behalf of individual groups that have asked us. We were able to audit the radiology services that they're currently receiving to identify the accuracy, the sensitivity, the specificity of what they're receiving, the biases, what is being called typically, what is being typically overlooked, what is being underreported, what is being overreported. Again, it's a new world, and we're able to now do that for radiologists. And Eli, I offer that as a service to you guys.
So maybe a bit of a provocation of does it, and maybe I think this is where Connie and maybe even a little Eli, you were saying, is it an either or? Because I think we tend as a profession, it's an either or. We're displacing the human, we're creating this. And I think there is a place for both places, right? We know we're short on radiologists. We know this can be a tool. It doesn't have to be an either or. So maybe a bit of provocation, and I'll send it first to Connie and then Eli and then Neil, is sort of how do we really support and educate veterinarians around where is AI a good choice? How do they look and evaluate that? Because that's one of the biggest challenges. I think your concern on regulation is, for a general practitioner, how do they know if what they're receiving is quality? So maybe start with you, Eli, and then Connie.
So education is very important, knowing what to look for in a product. One of the things that I would push for, the ACVR is not a regulatory body. We can make recommendations, and I think I fully recognize that the world's going to happen regardless of what the ACVR does. We're going to do our best to vet out information and make sure we're thinking about this deeply. I would just as an aside say that, at least speaking for myself, my special interest is in protecting the patient. I'd happily go sell ice cream in the Caribbean or something if AI replaces me. That's not why I'm making the points that I'm making. And I could speak I think there probably is some fear for some folks in the ACVR. I can't speak for everybody, but I would say that the special interest is in doing the best job for the patient. And so I think when we're educating people about it, it's also just whether you're a specialist or not a specialist, there's human cognitive errors that occur. So even if you can say that your AI is really good at seeing left-sided cardiomegaly or heart enlargement on a radiograph, it also needs to be able to do all the other things that we do. Mostly I talk about in my telerad service with the students, I'm here for the 5% of the time. The average competent, proficient veterinarian, we should be in agreement most of the time. To a human, that gives the false impression that you're not needed, right? You don't know you need me till you do. And part of the issue with that is recognizing when you do need me, right? We're very bad at self-assessment. We're not good at identifying what's not there. So the devil's going to be in the details. Just because it works in this use case, it's not enough that an AI can see pulmonary nodules. It also has to be discriminating that from eosinophilic bronchitis, which is not cancer, has a different treatment. It's not enough that you diagnose pulmonary edema. Can it discriminate infiltrates from pulmonary hypertension, which is a different treatment option? And I would also argue that I would bet that most general practitioners may not even be aware that that's a condition that exists that has a different treatment with sildenafil versus Lasix. So you have to be very careful when you're reading these studies. That's great, and I would argue those should have happened before a product is released, personally. Otherwise, I think you're testing a product on a patient population experimentally that's not proven. But I would say you have to define those border cases and those use cases, even if they're not the most common diagnoses, because again, they could result in morbidity and mortality. And so until you can do that, you're not approximating what we do. And I would also just put in a plug that it's more than just looking at pixels. There's an interpretive piece. There's a whole component of AI that's not yet happening, which is a common issue for a supportive service as radiology, is we don't get the clinical history and information that we need. That's part of how my human brain uses that target knowledge to make the best diagnosis. There's no AIs that are doing that. Other folks have raised issues about medical records and collating that. Those are all great things that I think are synergistic that could come together with training a better AI. Maybe we actually get new information. It's not just the left heart is big. Maybe that bronchial pattern and a high alk phos tells me some new information that I wouldn't have put together. That's interesting to me. What's currently happening is not so interesting. And I feel like we'll exploit those practitioners that are less confident and also less aware of those cognitive errors that can occur, and to ask what's not on that printout. So I think we have to be really careful about that and really look at what information is coming out before we decide, is this a good use case or not?
Thank you. Connie?
I'll just go back to the question around educating the consumers, the primary care veterinarians that might be using something that is operating, say, outside of, or even with, in the space of a radiologist. I think it has to be conversation. I'd love for it to happen at the veterinary school level, but I'm hearing already that their education problems are rampant there. So I don't know how we teach primary care doctors, or any veterinarian to be a good consumer of technology. It isn't just AI. I think about the variety or the number of ultrasound machines that all sit in practices, and the most they do is cystocentesis, or more recently CT scanners where people have no idea how to actually image the patient, or the early versions of the digital imaging situations where there was even one where someone stuck a digital camera under the table, not an actual plate. So I think that early on there can be a wide range of offerings in a technology, and veterinarians are not very good at distinguishing that. So somehow we need to have those conversations and get them out into bigger meetings, VMA meetings, at all levels, at the state level, at the local level, for people to begin to ask those questions and look at the information, have some sort of idea. We're not all going to become experts in convoluted neural networks or what a training set exactly should be and exclude from the testing bed, and all those sorts of things that I keep trying to learn. But I think that's what we can do. And I just wanted to tag on to what Eli said, that what we do as radiologists, really honestly, looking at the image and making the findings generally takes about, like 2 or 3 seconds. In the case of some lesions, it takes even less than that. The more important work that we do as radiologists is synthesizing all of the information. So the history, where did this patient come from? One of my favorites was, the patient that's being diagnosed as being in heart failure, and guess what? It just went to Denver from Minnesota, and no one took into account that the patient just had a 5,000-foot change in elevation. So I think that there's a lot of things that we do as radiologists that are far beyond just looking at the image and identifying the findings.
Thank you. Give you 2 minutes, and then we're going to turn it over to the audience for questions.
All right. A disagreement and an agreement. We'll end on an agreement. The disagreement is, I've got more confidence in practitioners than you guys do. I think practitioners are great. They really are. Heck of a lot of training went to produce a veterinarian. A veterinarian with experience in the field is incredibly competent. A veterinarian who graduates with knowledge is incredibly knowledgeable. Veterinarians are sharp. They are very good consumers. They can tell when something works or something doesn't work, and I would place much more confidence in veterinarians as colleagues, as friends, and as respected professionals. I don't believe we should exclude them from being able to discern what is good for veterinary medicine. Now, that's the disagreement. The agreement is there definitively is a place for the opinion of radiologists. There definitively is a place. Look at the numbers. In the United States, roughly 85% of films are never seen by a radiologist, 85. And at the same time, any radiologist you speak to is maxed out. Who's going to look at those films? And that's in the United States. In Europe, the numbers are even greater in that more films are not looked at than are looked at. Who's going to look at those films? Just look at those numbers. Utilizing AI, which has unlimited scale and a very high quality component, absolutely can screen and look at a lot of films. The occasional film that does the dog that went from Minnesota to Colorado, that it would be appropriate to send to a radiologist, absolutely, and get that opinion. And I fully support that, and I endorse that, and I don't take away from the knowledge base of radiologists and their ability to do that. I think it's great to discern one pulmonary nodule from another pulmonary nodule, to identify different types of cardiovascular changes on a radiograph. Sure, it'd be great to get that opinion. And when that opinion is given, it's not a legal opinion, it's a professional opinion. Separate that out. In human medicine, it's legal. In veterinary medicine, it's just a professional opinion. When that professional opinion is given, then the veterinarian can discern whether they agree with it or not. And again, come back to reinforcing the abilities of veterinarians as professionals to discern whether that opinion makes sense or doesn't make sense. There's a role for radiologists, absolutely, and I would endorse that as well.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to turn it over to the audience to see if there are any questions for the panelists, give you guys an opportunity to share your thoughts on this topic. Otherwise, I'm sure we can continue to, to discuss it here.
Janine, I don't have a question, I have a comment.
Yeah, please.
I know everybody pretty much on the stage. This is the kind of discourse that we need at this function. And this is really the first time we've had some very open discourse on these really potent issues in the veterinary space. And we need more of this. Thank you, participants. And we need more of this in all of the other issues that we've been discussing for the past day and a half.
Hi, Jamie Cheshire, general practitioner. I just wanted to comment that you guys are getting to the crux of the issue that we find as practitioners. My clinic sends RADs to 2 different places for review, one that uses a lot of AI and one that's a local radiologist. And we find that as practitioners, when we want nuance, when we want more interpretation, when we want them to actually look at all the details of the case, we are choosing the radiologist. When we are looking for MET checks, cruciates, those sorts of things, we're sending it to AI. And I think that there's an opportunity to do better to increase accessibility for a human contact when AI is used, and to provide some additional nuance to film reading when AI becomes more prevalent.
Thank you.
It's an excellent comment. That's really excellent. Not knowing who you use or don't use, it's really an excellent comment in that the combination is really strong. AI plus radiologists is stronger than AI by itself, and it's stronger than radiologists by themselves. And so, and then AI also varies, right? Depending on, there's a great variety of AI out there as well. And so Connie, there's opportunity there. So, in other words, can you use AI and radiologists as a combination? There is a heck of a lot of opportunity there. Yeah, well said.
Thank you.
Well said.
One more question.
Yeah, and I appreciate the comment from over here. That was great. And I think what we're seeing here too is there is a need for education about technology and practice. And I don't know, I'm not aware if those are course offerings at veterinary colleges right now, but it seems to me we should get those kinds of programs into development so that veterinarians who are going to demand that coursework, because I do think that the early career veterinarians are demanding technology. Like we heard yesterday, the comment of the iPhone in the crib. I mean, that is not an exaggeration. So veterinarians, our future veterinarians are going to be intensely consuming technology, and it's already starting now. I guess, is there coursework? This debate is great, and I think that's a debate that needs to start before young veterinarians are veterinarians working in practice, because there are technologies that are amazing, and then there are technologies that are not going to work, but having some framework to filter all these new technologies and allowing for veterinarians to have some kind of coursework that helps them prepare.
Appreciate that. I'm just going to ask each of the panelists to speak on that, and then we'll probably close. So if you want to start, Neil. But
it's a great comment in that today's veterinarian wants technology, right? It wants, and the numbers, in addition to that overall impression, which is very astute, the numbers support that. Specifically in radiology, when I know from our product, I don't know about others, but I know from our product, when our product is used for 2 months in a practice, whether it's an emergency practice or a primary care practice, the number of pets that benefit from diagnostic radiographs increases. And I say that those numbers very comfortably, that veterinarians use the technology, re-engage with radiology, gain more confidence, and take more films, recommended or more confident or stronger, and take more films. They're using technology as an aid, and that aid is very beneficial to the patient. Without a doubt, they receive more films. It would be great for the schools to adapt. I don't know how many deans are in the audience today. Happy to have the conversation. What's happened is the private sector has gone a little bit ahead of the schools in this regard. Be happy to engage with the schools as well.
I'd love to get thoughts from the other two as well.
Just grabbing your microphone. Yeah, well, I haven't been in academia other than to offer maybe a few courses here and there. I work with some of the students at Oregon State through the Oregon Humane Society, and when I was down in California, I did some business coursework with the UC Davis students. And it's really sad that the business courses are considered optional or out of hours. They're not considered part of the core curriculum. And I would put technology as part of the business coursework as well, and other folks I've heard about how to read contracts and things like that. So I'm at a loss as to how to change that either. I mean, I've done what I can do on my own time to help train students in a variety of ways, but again, it needs to kind of come from academia, but I think it needs to be happening.
So as the lonely academician up here, I would say some of this is happening. So on the granular level, there's not AI courses being taught, but I have delivered some talks to pathology clubs and student specialty clubs, and I think that given curriculum restraints, that's probably where the first phase of that will occur. I would say that we have had a course for several years at NC State called Veterinary Medical Decision Making, which I teach into, and mostly I'm focused on cognitive errors and how our monkey brains make bad decisions, whether you're a specialist or not a specialist. And I would actually say that that is a more portable skill that you can apply to any technology. And in the example given, the choice of whether to send it for nuance or not is inherent on you knowing that there's not something else you need to ask about. And that is a human cognitive error. That's a blind spot that we have as dressed up apes. And so it's not what level of skill you're at. That happens at the specialist level. That happens at the general practice level. So I think it's really important. I think that's happening more in veterinary schools. But making you aware of those errors is part of the way we combat those, and then you can port that skill into whatever technology you want to assess. But that's a lot of why I view AI through this lens. And as a support service every day, I'm virtually in people's clinics all over the world. And there are preserved errors, I'm sure Connie can speak to, that we see every day whether it's radiation safety or positioning. No one anywhere teaches you to do a single lateral view of anything. That happens on a daily basis. There's reasons why we don't do that. The reasons people do that is because of confirmation bias, prevalence error, premature closure. There's all these terms we need to be aware of as veterinarians so that we can reduce errors. And I would encourage folks to have a think about that when we view the choice, even whether AI is the right first step or not, is contingent on you knowing that you're not missing something else to ask about.
I want to thank the panelists for a lively conversation. Appreciate the good discourse. And I'll maybe go with one provocative statement. I hear a lot, we need to take our lessons from human healthcare. And what I will say is, as a human, I find navigating human healthcare incredibly impossible. And so I'd provocate, why can't human healthcare learn from us? Because I think there are things in veterinary medicine where we can change the way we're thinking, and they can learn from what we do differently. And having this kind of dialogue, having it openly with very different opinions on the stage, is one of the things that makes me confident in this profession. So maybe human healthcare should learn more from us. Thank you. Thank you.